Hey guys, how you doing?
Good. How are you going?
Good. I have to say two really geeky things real quick. Andrew,
Yeah.
I think I have to hold you responsible for giving me a heart attack during Mother. Um, I watched
Sorry.
that. No, no, fine with me because that was one of probably the most unforgettable movie going experiences I have ever had. And I still think about it like 5 years later. And then Myron, you edited Camp, which is one of my favorite movies ever. Um,
Thank you.
a lot of odd parallels with the movie we're going to talk about, since musical theater. Robin DeJesus is in it, Stephen Sondheim, this, that, and the other. So, thank you guys for taking the time to talk to me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah. This congratulations also on the nomination. This was probably my most satisfying nominate. I mean, I'm sure it was for you guys too, but also, this is such a great nomination because of how sneakily complex this movie is. I feel like I think the adaptation is brilliant. I spoke with Stephen Levinson about the adaptation. I think it's just amazing how it sort of takes so many different perspectives and mashes them all together. It's incredibly impressive. I guess sort of in a general sense, do you guys approach editing a musical differently than anything else? Obviously there's different elements that come into that because there's music and performance, but I was wondering if there's anything specifically that you guys have to change about your process when you approach a musical.
Myron, you take that.
Well, I would say that I'm trying not to, as much as you're picking performance based on maybe singing versus dialogue. But I like to think that we're still storytellers, and we're picking things that move us and scare us and make us angry, and try to put together any number of scenes based on that. And so when I approach the material, I'm literally watching it wash over me like any other audience member. And I take meticulous notes of like, oh my God, this is a thing that made me cry, or this is a thing that, gave me goosebumps. And usually those are the things that make it into the film. And then, we react to, audience screenings and say, well, people are confused with this. So maybe we need to work, maybe we need to, maybe it shouldn't be about Superbia, for example, but heavy. Maybe we should try to narrow that down a little bit. Or, maybe we need to work on the relationships with Jonathan to make sure everyone understands that these are his friends. All these things are any different than any other project that we're on. And I would say that the only harder thing is that with musicals, people, they have they always love the original source material. They're always looking for the song that you cut out, or the song that was sung in a very specific way. So you're constantly having to rework things and try to approach the material to help meet the expectation of an audience, but also sometimes subvert it as well.
I think from moment to moment in a musical, I don't think you really approach it that differently. I mean, I don't, in terms of getting the story beats working and the narrative flow and character and tone and all those things. Like it still has all the same challenges. There are some kind of technical or strategic differences that come up along the way. For instance, how the musical numbers are paced through the whole piece, and as you work to, when you've assembled a film, it's usually way too long, and then you keep focusing and honing and figure out how to simplify things, refocus things, remove things that are overcomplicated, that dilute the intentions. But when you're doing that process and compressing, you keep hitting these 3 or 4 minute numbers where it's almost impossible to do that. So you kind of have these blocks in your way. So within those numbers, you have to come up with more inventive ways in terms of the song structure or other things to try and reduce numbers. Then you also have to think about tonally what's happening with the musical pieces, whether there's too many lighter numbers pulled together and then more ballads. How does that measure out over the whole piece that affects the pace of the film, which is different than a theatrical performance in some ways, like what you feel watching a up to 2-hour movie versus watching a play.
Yeah.
And that's where you run into some challenges where some of the assumptions of how it works in the theater is not the same as how it feels in a film.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a musical theater person. I will fully admit musical theater people can be huge assholes when it comes to like there's like, I mean that in a very like not, you know, mean way, but it's sort of like, I think there is sometimes a forgetfulness in terms of like, this medium is one thing and it's not the same thing as another thing. Like one of my favorite songs from Tick Tick Boom is Green Green Dress, and then it's just utilized in a different way. And I feel like there's like probably a teensy part of me where it was like, but I want to hear Green Green Dress, but it was like, it's fine, it wouldn't work for the story there, it doesn't make any sense for the story they're trying to tell.
No, it's totally superfluous to the story if you when you analyze it, even though the number's great and there's a wink to it. And it does exist. It was shot. It's just, but that's one of the things where we talked about, we considered the pace of the whole piece. And there was a conversation early on with Lynn where he said, if I was writing this as a musical entirely on my own, I would never put Green Green Dress and No More back to back. But they don't make sense tonally and structurally, yet that's how it worked in the screenplay and in the story. And then you know, so you have to wrestle with that. Those choices.
Right. That kind of reminds me of how like rearranging stuff, even like moving songs around. Like you don't want to, like, if you think about like Chicago, you have to establish where the prison is first, and that's why Cell Block Tango comes before Mama Morton's song when in the show it's flipped.
Right.
Okay.
You have different expositional considerations.
Those us musical theater people are a little unforgiving at first, but
you know, I'll just add that our challenge, you know, is to make the musical theater fans happy, but also to bring in people who don't necessarily love musicals. And between In the Heights and Tick Tick Boom, you know, I've been working hard to just like, I don't know, just try to give fresh life to the genre and say, you know, like, stop treating it like this thing that you don't love. Like, it could be grounded, or it could be, you know, magical. We could still move you, like, give it a chance. So you know, we're playing around a lot with, you know, what the form is.
I think actually specifically with those two shows turned into movie musicals, I think, at least for me personally, the response that I've gotten from like non-musical theater people who don't know the stories, I think those are the two that people respond to the most this year, in this year of musicals that we have. Okay, I would love to ask about a couple specific musical sequences, if I may. I think 3090 is like a perfect, you know, introduction to the show, because I love the way that it's shot. There's a cut in the movie of Alexandra running behind Jonathan in the library as she's like holding on to the bookshelf. That's my favorite shot of the movie. Actually, I watched the movie just for that one part, the most random section that I like. It establishes so much in terms of Jonathan on stage telling the story, also Jonathan narrating the story, and I think it's sort of almost subconsciously put in our brain of how the structure of the movie is going to work. What can you sort of tell me about the pressure of introducing all of these story elements all at one time at the very top of the movie?
Well, you know, it went through a lot of different permutations, and there was a lot. There were a lot of options. Lynn was well aware, and we had discussed that there were a lot of things that we wanted to introduce there, and it was going to be a trick to find the right balance. You know, I think we wanted to get all the key locations in. We wanted to and nods to them, so it at least subliminally set them up. We wanted to get all the hero characters in. We wanted to establish, at least peripherally, the kind of the main dilemmas that he was going to face, that he has a musical that he's trying to get going, that he has this relationship and money issues, that he had all those things are all nodded at. And it became clear that some weren't really leaned into hard enough. It's the kind of things you learn when you start to show the movie to people. But I think we knew it too, that maybe we needed to have some more grounding in the diner setting, and some of his friends there. And the other thing that was, I think, a big part of it was tone. It doesn't just set up the literal details of what our story is and what our characters are, but also just the energy that the film is going to have. I would say that it probably, at least initially, had more of a neurotic tone than we ended up with in terms of his character and his neurosis about turning 30 and not making it yet, and that he was running out of that time. It seemed obvious after a while to us that was already baked into the number itself, and we didn't need to lean it. We didn't need to lean into Jonathan being perpetually nervous about that. But that was good. That was already well established just by the song and by other scenes. So that's something that changed, which Myron can speak to, because that's where some of the reshoots came in.
Yeah, 3090 just as a piece was already working, but there was so many things about, questions about Jonathan for people who didn't know who he was. We needed to establish that. Lynn really wanted all the audience to be on the same, playing field as far as like information, but also we didn't want to tip our hat too much, make it all about Rent. But then, we shot little things like Susan and him, celebrating their anniversary with sort of, verite type footage, video footage, and we reshot, his friends in the diner. We had to sort of meticulously insert little things without breaking the whole number, and then at the same time help establish this grammar that Andy was talking about, that we're allowed to cut between all these different locations. We're allowed to cut between archival and our own video footage of Jonathan on the stage, and our beautiful shots of Alice Brooks' beautiful photography of in all these different locations. And then at the same time make the musical number sing and make it feel like you're actually there in like a live Billy Joel sort of Eric Bogosian, rock concert. So it's there was just a lot to juggle. And if anything that I worked on more 3090 was over the course of 7 months, was that number, was just getting that right, just cutting so many different versions. There was a version where there's a shot at the end of the film where Jonathan pulls the piano cover off and he's just staring at it. And I tried that at the beginning of the film. And by trying it at the beginning and it didn't work, then we're like, oh, maybe we'll use it at the end. So we're just like playing and experimenting, but at the same time, just trying to build it emotionally. It was just, it's really intimidating to work on something that's like, you can do anything. You could steal a shot here, you can use it there. And you're like, I know, but it has to mean something, it has to work emotionally. It can't just feel random. It needs to feel motivated. Like I've just tried so hard between those two films to just make everything feel so damn motivated and not sloppy and purposeful. And Andrew's already a master at doing all that. I'm still like working my way through, like trying to get there. And so to tear things apart in 3090 and then put it back together and make it all feel organic isn't always easy.
Yeah, that number kind of even, it gives us a lot of anticipation of what we're gonna see. It's sort of like, it quite literally is like almost like when you go to the theater and you listen to an overture and you sort of hear all the music, but it's like a premise of all the emotional beats we're gonna get. Thing that I really love about it. I think probably the most played song in my house is probably Therapy, which I'm sure a lot of people are probably asking you about. I like how definitive the cuts are from the relationship to the song on stage. I love the awkward faces of those actors looking right at the camera. It sort of is making you laugh, but also realizing this is a big loss for Jonathan of his relationship falling apart. It's just a really great song to begin with, and the way that you guys it's done in the movie is obviously different than it is on stage, and it's so successful in a completely different way. What can you guys tell me about that sequence? Because just thinking about it makes me laugh.
The number is kind of a Trojan horse because it's meant to, tonally it's funny and it's riffing on Reach for the Gun or whatever, it clearly has all these obvious kind of bossy references, and there's a lot of humor in the idea of having this fight juxtaposed with this number that's kind of diffusing it with humor. But it is the point ultimately where the movie starts to take a much more serious turn in terms of what's at stake for him and his relationships, not just with Susan, but with Michael, which is also its own kind of love affair, or it's his own relationship in a way that he's starting to have to confront the choices that have been brewing the whole time. So for the movie to segue into this area, it was just bold. So we were aware that we had to make the scene work dramatically and energetically. There are a lot of technical things about that number that ultimately, can distract from those intentions, which is just trying to figure out all the tempo changes and all that stuff and how you get in and out of the number and the argument. But I was primarily concerned with making sure the argument worked first and that the song would complement it, because I knew I knew that the song was going to work and that there wasn't anything complicated about it internally. It just dictated itself how it was meant to be cut, because the tempo keeps increasing, so the cutting patterns keep increasing, and the energy keeps building to this crescendo, and then he screws up, basically, and that's where it falls off. But the real exercise with that was condensing that and simplifying it, which was its own technical challenge. But I did always think about it as the turning point of the film.
Yeah, because if the fight portion of it doesn't work and we're not on board with it, it sort of would feel like superfluous. Like the emotion, the emotional tenderness of that scene has to work first, I guess, before the jump of the song.
Right, it becomes cliches and just kind of jokes and like, oh, this is just a riff on modern romance, and it doesn't really mean anything if you don't get to the meat of what the choices he's faced with.
Yeah,
we had to the other thing was just trying to calibrate how intense that fight can get. And originally Garfield gives amazing performance regardless, but he came in really hot at the beginning of that scene, and we're like, oh my god, they're already screaming at each other at the beginning of the scene. So just trying to figure out a place to go in that number because it has to have an arc as well. It can't just, it has to build, we have to feel tension, and then, when that moment comes with, Susan saying essentially like, I just needed you to tell me to stay. There's a little shift there as well. So we just had to make sure that we didn't start that scene at a place where we could never recover. And we also had to have a place where, Garfield could go, he could hit rock bottom basically after, the scene with Robin on the street. That's sort of rock bottom there. But anyways, just Andy did a brilliant job intercutting, and then Lynn, of course, wanted to cut it down even further. So I'm like, well, it's already great. Like, why do I have to touch this thing? It's already, and then, having Lynn sitting right next to you, it's like, why can't you just put in this line between these two verses, or, in this chorus? So it's really complicated. It's really intimidating to work with something that is cut so quickly, and then you're trying to pare it down more. And as Andy was saying, those tempo changes. And then on top of that, trying to make it feel grounded because it's all lip sync. So trying to make it feel actually there. So you're going back and forth with your music editors and trying to, shift 100 edits, by frames, and you're like, well, I can't do that because then I mess up this edit. It's just a lot of, it kind of makes you a little crazy when you're cutting it out, like therapy.
Okay. I guess the last specific sequence I wanted to ask about was, I don't know why I'm forgetting the name of the song, the one with Andrew at the piano by himself.
Why?
Yeah. Why? That's it. It's well, the one where he's in like the park and he takes off when he's singing about him and Michael. The thing that I was so impressed with that is when we get to see like the home movie portion to sort of, show us the history of these two friends. I like how there are a lot of shots of Andrew that like linger on him before it cuts to something else. It really hits home the weight of what this news is doing to him. It's really sort of gentle and sort of beautiful about how it stays with him before it goes to what we see in his head, of what he's thinking about in his head. And it's probably, to me, as an audience member, the most delicate sequence of the movie. How, just tell me all about that, because I was so, especially when I watched it last night, I was so impressed with what that sequence does.
Well, it evolved a lot because we shot that stuff at the Delacorte the second to last day before we were shut down for the pandemic initially. And the original plan was that it was going to be intercut with a elaborate stuff of him performing as a kid, and then as a young adult, and then at his current age, with him basically singing in the foreground on piano, where you see this action happening in the background in a full like high school auditorium, and all that stuff. It was clear for various logistical safety reasons that wasn't going to be what we were going to shoot. But we knew that we needed to visualize and reference his youth and his recollections of his relationship with Michael and how they had grown together and enjoyed the theater together, and found this love and passion for it together, and that he was still holding on to that, and that is the why. And that needed visual components. I said, we need to find footage to intercut with this, whether it's home movies or other stuff. And Lynn immediately brought out his own home movies of himself as a kid performing, which we used as a placeholder for a lot of that stuff. And then we took some outtakes from the party with Michael, and from the performance at the workshop where Michael looks at him and he's happy with what's happened with the number. Just some different outtakes, and kind of put a video treatment on it and try to figure out what to do. But we knew we had to shoot some other material, which Myron handled when they came time to shoot. But the simplicity of that sequence was born out of certain logistical issues, but also just trying to. We spent a lot of time working on the material that led up to it, like the reveal that Michael's HIV positive, and the run through the park and all that stuff, shaping that in a way that it didn't peak emotionally before we got to the Delacorte, which was pretty tricky, because there's a lot of emotion released before that, and you know, Robin is singing his heart out and all this stuff. That one of the things originally about that is that real life was just a solo piano and voice, which was then followed by Y, which is solo piano and voice. And I brought up the issue that we had to differentiate it somewhere. And then Ben and I started talking about what could that be musically, and then he started to work with his team on that, which In the Air Tonight was a reference to that, actually, just the emotional shape of that music and the instrumentation. But we definitely made it very different. Anyway, Myron, you could talk about the kid footage that was shot there. The other things.
Yeah, they you know, we went back again to pick up, you know, the real footage. I guess Lynn didn't want his footage in the final film, but even though I think our producers were on the fence a little bit, they're like, it works, don't touch it. Yeah, this is amazing. But yeah, the number was in a good place emotionally. My job was not to break it and figure out an elegant way to use our new Super 8 footage or our new sort of video footage. You know, there are different treatments, and make it feel elegant, and it's always tricky when you bring in a new sort of thing so late into the movie, you know, like home footage. And you know, we ended up using one shot of Robin, a young young Michael on the stage, basically getting a rose when we first introduce it. And we just that little piece of information at the beginning, you know, early in the movie, what kind of allowed us, like, we kind of made our own rule, but we just said, okay, we've already established this little element, so now we can go into this sort of home movie land. And yeah, just picking pieces that just felt you know, elegant and emotional. And you know, if you watch it again, you'll see something new every time. You know, there's kids in the background doing certain things, and then, you know, that shot of young Jonathan and Michael on the dock, that used to be reversed. We used to go to the older version of them, and I just kept playing. I just felt like doing something obvious didn't seem to earn our place emotionally. So putting the young kids there had a real, I don't know, again, that's a thing that it gives you a goosebump or makes you want to cry. You end up saying, okay, that's it. Even though it's counterintuitive in some ways. There's so many things that Andy and I did that I feel were counterintuitive to, like, what kind of shot you would put in a certain place throughout the entire film. And we would speak another 3 hours about that. But I you know, that's the type of thing where you're just, there's something saying in your gut that, you know, that this shot will work here in the spirit of this number. And yeah, and not getting in the way of Andrew's, you know, that's one of the few numbers that Andrew's singing live on the stage. You know, it's not lip sync, it's his actual voice. And so to, you know, pay tribute to that, to make it, this is the rest before, we're pretty much at the end of our film. This is the rest, and this is the place where we're going to just take everything in that we've just watched emotionally.
You frozen?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, hey.
There you
Did
go.
you lose me?
Just for a brief second. Yeah, I think we're good now.
Okay.
I will say the shot of them, the shot on the dock actually reminded me of a shot of them at the beginning of the movie when it's the scene where Robin is, where Michael is explaining about how he can't get into, the equity building. That sort of made the connection for me. So it sort of made me think of, these two friends sitting there talking a lot. That was a connection that I made that I actually really enjoyed.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah, I didn't realize we were talking for a half hour already. So I think that might be all I have for you guys. I love the movie so much.
Thank you.
Like a bleeding heart of a movie, and I think it's very, very wonderful. So thank you guys for your time. Congratulations again, and I really
thank you.
Thank you. This was great.
All right.
Really appreciate it, Joey.
All right.
Yeah. Have a good day. Stay safe.
You.